We've put everything into this business. So we take everything quite personally. So knowing that we've then missed out on a seating and it might only be $200, it might be $300 for that person's booking. For us, that fucking hurts a lot. Like, it still digs deep. You work hard, your staff work hard. We've got a booking system, and if someone can't click on the link to say, actually, we've changed our mind, we're not going to come, for me, that's just a lack of courtesy and a lack of respect.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. No-shows. They're one of the great profit killers of every restaurant. A seat held in good faith on a promise, but left empty as guests fail to show without even a phone call to cancel. Just as some restrictions eased, allowing restaurants to welcome back customers in limited numbers, the great no-show killer cut a swathe through many restaurants. Given we happily pay for tickets to the movies, the football, or a concert, is it time to rethink the model for restaurants? Sali Sasi and her husband Nathan own one of Australia's and Adelaide's best establishments, Leigh Street Wine Room. Sali, how are you going?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. There's lots to talk about here, and especially no-shows and models moving forward. But I just wondered, you have a fairly new restaurant, which, garnered a lot of support and a lot of excitement. What was it like putting so much energy into an establishment and then something coming along like a pandemic and changing everything so dramatically?
Yeah, look, even just to start, I'm obviously new to hospitality. I've only been in the game for 8 months, as opposed to obviously Nathan, who's been in it for nearly 2 decades. So for me, I suppose it was already a shock to the system as it is, because we had opened up a new place, we had fitted out an entire new venue, put our life savings into it, and obviously worked really hard up until that point. I feel like, Nathan was doing 80 to 100 hours a week. I was doing 60 to 70, and we had put everything into it, and we were reaping the success and the rewards. And we were at the pinnacle point of a lot of people when they open that restaurant and they just managed to get things right. People are falling in love with it. The place is booming, it's buzzing, and you're getting really great reviews left, right, and centre. So we were definitely at our peak, and then pretty much overnight it was crash and burn pretty much, as we were with the rest of the country, let alone the world. So it really was quite devastating and to an element also quite traumatic. I think you're invested so much emotionally, especially when it is your own business, there's no backers financially, that, we thought we were doing the right thing by putting everything we had financially, not taking out much of a loan, to then kind of be in a position where we felt we could lose it all pretty much overnight. It was just, devastating to say the least.
What was the impact on those early days when you realised you had to close the doors? It was, a government decision pretty much, unless you do take away. How did you feel at that time, and what did you guys do in those first couple of weeks to deal with it?
Well, look, in Adelaide, it was pretty much like a slow death. It was, everyone was hemorrhaging. The government, the state government here in Adelaide still hadn't forced everyone to shut their doors. So knowing that collectively as a community, we weren't doing great, and we knew we would probably be in a better position to shut down and actually hibernate and be able to control the costs, by then being able to, whether it's negotiating with landlords or looking at some type of government support, we actually decided to call upon the government to hold a meeting here at Leigh Street Wine Room. So I actually got in touch with Steve Marshall, our premier, and organised with Duncan from Africola to get probably about 40 of Adelaide's top restaurant owners and chefs together. And we kind of brought the reality to him where I think in his mind he thought we hadn't yet reached that point. But in that eye-opening moment, we let him know that, in that meeting we had let go collectively about 550 staff.
Wow.
And this is before any forced closures had occurred. And I think having him sit in front of us all and actually hear us say, like, we're begging, not even saying, we're all begging to be collectively shut down. I think it was a real eye-opener for him, and it probably accelerated some of that decision-making, because he actually wasn't aware as to where we're at. He thought that we would actually be opposed to it. So that was it was quite nice to see the community come together, but it was also great to have our state listen to what we wanted as business owners. And I think closing down was one of those things. It fucking hurts, don't get me wrong. You are having to let go of people. For us in our position, we hadn't been open 12 months. So we, had a lot of people who wouldn't be covered on certain government schemes like JobKeeper, for instance. So that was a really difficult one. I think for us, being business owners, you have got a sense of responsibility to your team to ensure they're looked after, not just now during this pandemic, but also long term, ensuring that we're making the right business decisions to reopen and reopen successfully, so that we can continue to employ our team and potentially even employ others long term.
You've had a pretty wild ride for the last year, opening your first restaurant and then having this happen. How have you coped with the last year, and what's it been like?
Look, it hasn't been too bad. I've been my background's in e-commerce and startup businesses, so I've learned to operate on a little to no sleep already in my past background of business. So I kind of slipped right into hospitality with ease on that. In saying that, I have got a whole new level of respect for anyone in hospitality, whether you're back of house or front of house. I cannot believe, A, how fucking hard everyone works, and even how hard it is just to be on your feet all day long. But I actually can't believe the impact that hospitality workers have in the fact that they have direct feedback from guests in that element. So they're servicing, but unlike others who maybe, in my businesses, I might sell a product online and it might be 2 or 3 weeks if I get some feedback. Sometimes I don't get feedback at all. But you're getting direct feedback from your guests in a real live environment and a real life moment. And I think that in itself can be celebratory. You can actually love it and you can live off the highs of that. But if it isn't great, you also feel it deep within very quickly. And I think growing a backbone in this industry is something I've had to learn to do quite quickly. And it's something that I had no idea about with hospitality, that they actually it was quite such an emotionally driven industry, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, your venue is long and thin and sort of elbow to elbow, and to create amazing energy of the great wine bars. How do you see the restaurant moving forward with restrictions and all of the various things in place as the government tries to open up society? How are you going to manage that?
Look, we're probably really fortunate looking back that we did decide to build such a small venue, and that, on the bottom level, we're at a capacity of 36 people. So we are definitely kind of counting our lucky stars that we didn't decide to go bigger and we decided to keep it intimate. I think there's been a lot of talk in the air as to whether it's 10 people or 20 people, like what's the point of opening? No one wants to sit in a dead restaurant. But I actually think for now that's almost becoming the norm, and guests actually are okay with it being much quieter than, say, the average Friday night where we've often got a wait list, and you are literally, like you said, elbow to elbow. I think at the moment guests are so invested in wanting to rebuild businesses and also for themselves be out and about that whether there's 10 people or whether there's 20 or whether there's 80, it's almost becoming irrelevant now. People want to be supporting chefs to, get them back in the kitchen and putting great food on a plate, or they want to be there to help support front of house staff and seeing them back on the floor, serving wines, laughing and interacting. I think for us here at Leigh Street Wine Room, one of the keys will definitely be ensuring that our guests are forefront of mind. We have a policy that they're not called customers, they're not called patrons, they are guests, and we treat them as if they're walking into our own living room. And that means that the interactions are genuine and, we genuinely give a shit about them. And I think sustainability-wise, long-term, that's what it takes, because I heard the podcast with Duncan a few days ago where, he mentioned about you want to get the guests who come maybe 2 times a week as opposed to just once or twice a year. And I think that's what it is when you give back to these people and you invest in them and they can see that you give genuine service. These are the people who are first and foremost in your corner to support you. Here at Leigh Street Wine Room, one of our first visitors when we opened, his name's Tim. He has been coming to us when we were open at Leigh Street, when we closed and we did the Providore boxes. He was the first guest to purchase one. When we opened up Juice Traders online, he was, the first customer to purchase wines from us, and he's now one of the first guests to actually make a booking for our reopening. And I think that's what it's going to come down to, is ensuring that we are, giving those guests that extreme excellence of service that they definitely deserve. It's not even what they expect; it's actually what they deserve.
Before we get to what you are doing when you're opening up again, can we have a look at some of the things that you've done in the meantime to keep some revenue stream coming through? You just briefly mentioned the Providores box and stuff. Can you tell us what you've been doing and what's involved in that?
Yeah, so initially with the takeaway model, it didn't actually work for us in the form of doing food. The food that Nathan makes is quite time-consuming to produce, but it also doesn't travel well. It's food that we wanted for people to enjoy in the restaurant. So we made the business decision that we wouldn't do the takeaway model. In saying that, a lot of our suppliers, we had heard of stories where Gazander Oysters, for example, they were now selling their oysters at the back of their car on the side of the road. And for us, that was really heartbreaking to hear. Majority of our suppliers are from small producers here in South Australia. So when we heard stories of that, we knew we had to do something, even if it was only on a small scale. We had to produce something that felt like we were at least doing what we could to give them a little bit of extra money. So with that, we produced the Providore boxes, and we also did a picnic box. And they were just, produce from all our local suppliers, some wine from our local wine producers, and they were basically almost like a click and go. So click, collect and go model. It was great for a couple of weeks. After that, obviously, as the industry was progressing, everyone started doing a lot of produce boxes. So the demand became less because there was obviously a lot more opportunity to buy. Even producers were doing them themselves. So there was a lot more offerings on the marketplace. So it came to a point where we then decided, look, this is no longer working in regards to a smart business model. We then wrote to the director of liquor licensing here in South Australia and basically requested a secondary license to be able to trade online. And that's where we launched Juice Traders. So selling our wine list basically online throughout Australia, and that's now through this pandemic become a secondary business to Leigh Street Wine Room, and it'll continue to do so.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I know it's almost like, and we look with that idea from getting the license approved to creating a whole new brand and bringing it to life was 6 days. So I think it's one of those things where you're almost backed into a corner. You've got you've got two opportunities. One of them is fucking, cry your eyes out and go, why me, or why is this happening, when it's really happening to everybody worldwide, and sitting on your hands and doing nothing. But for us, we were like, well, this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate our business, what we have on offer, and how can we, even run Leigh Street Wine Room smarter. When we opened and we grew so quickly, there wasn't any time to actually look at things and see how we could improve them, how can we make things more efficient, how can we actually reduce costs, etc. We've used this pandemic to ensure that we have really accelerated both businesses, Juice Traders and Leigh Street Wine Room, the best way possible. So when we do normalise and we do get back to trade, we can obviously do so in a far better position maybe than what we were before we closed.
When restaurants opened the doors just recently and, they're allowed people in their restaurants again, I think many of us were shocked to see that horrible no-show thing rear its ugly head again, especially in these circumstances.
I just can't fucking believe it.
Can you give us an idea of what impact a no-show has on a restaurant? And then let's talk about a new model, something that you've introduced.
Yeah. Look, it has a huge impact. I mean, for us, as I mentioned earlier, we're only 36 seats. So even pre-COVID, we operated half walk-in, half bookings our bar. When the booking is set and you're expecting for that person to come, and we often have a wait list, or we have people coming up asking for a seat, and we say, sorry, we're full, and you're turning away guests who actually are ready to come down and sit and enjoy your venue, to only then find out that the guest who's meant to show up has decided to not cancel their booking at all, it really pisses you off. It's a complete mood changer, and that's the one thing you've got to keep it in check, because you're furious, and it really puts you in a downer. But you obviously have to keep your head right whilst you're servicing. But it can be annoying because, and again, maybe it comes back as well for Nathan and I. We've put everything into this business, so knowing our plan to pay back the money we've invested, and be able to use this as a way to set up the future of our kids, we take everything quite personally. So knowing that we've then missed out on a seating, and it might only be $200, it might be $300 for that person's booking. For us, that fucking hurts a lot. Like, it still digs deep. You work hard, your staff work hard. And so to know that it came down to a lack of respect, because basically that's what it is. We've got a booking system, and if someone can't click on the link to say, actually, we've changed our mind, we're not going to come, for me, that's just a lack of courtesy and a lack of respect. With that, pre-COVID, we did have a pre-auth amount. So we had $10 per booking initially. And we would charge, like, if anyone didn't show, I'll just do the full booking. If there's 7 people, they get charged $70. Post-COVID now, we've moved to a different model where it's a ticketed system. So we pre-sell tickets for dinner service. It's $100 your way, so $100 per head, and that can be spent anyhow you like on the night. And then lunchtimes, it's $50 your way, so $50 per service. $50 per head, and again, they can use that how they like in that meal time. But that just ensures that we're obviously making minimum spend for that time slot. If someone doesn't show, our asses are covered pretty much. Like I mentioned to you before, not all of our staff are on JobKeeper, so we're actually having to pay staff wages for our entire kitchen team. None of them made the JobKeeper. Front of house, I've only got 2 people who are on JobKeeper. The others I have to pay. So for us, every dollar counts. And if someone is going to cancel, unfortunately, with our new policy, they will lose the deposit, which is a full $100.
What's the response been to this system?
You know what? It's actually been surprisingly good. I was a little concerned putting it out there, thinking, because obviously what we're asking is for guests to have a new mentality to the way that you dine. But I think the fact that a lot of businesses or in hospitality and in the industry now are starting to roll out their own way of ensuring that there's a deposit or there's a pre-auth or whatever it might be, I feel as though it's slowly becoming the new norm. We haven't actually had anyone get upset about it. If anything, the guests here in South Australia have been phenomenal, where they have actually, they'll send an email and say, hey, can I make a booking? I've got my credit card details. Half of them throw their credit card details into the email, and they're like, take the payments, no problem. So we've been very, very fortunate. This weekend, for example, all of our bookings have booked out, so that's been great. And we've just released the sittings for next week. But it's a non-negotiable policy for us until we see restrictions completely lifted.
Restaurants often take time, often years, to grow into their bones and fill out and become what they're going to be. And your restaurant was still quite young when the pandemic happened, although it was thriving and receiving like rave reviews. Do you think this experience will change what you do with the restaurant moving forward?
Yeah, to some element. Look, it's probably going to make Nathan quit being a chef, and he'll probably end up trading on the stock market, to be true. I think the time out of the kitchen, he's gone from 0 to 100 real quick, and he's just kind of gone, whoa, this is what it's like to have a life outside of the walls of the restaurant. So let's hope we can get him back in there. But look, in saying that, one of those things is definitely with myself and Nathan, we've discovered that there's a real sense of balance that we were missing pre-pandemic, and for us that means that when we reopen, we are going to change some things up. Neither one of us want to spend every waking moment in this venue. We love it, and it's been incredible for even the 8 months that we had it. However, there has to be a balance because what we were doing was not sustainable. And so for Nathan, that means gearing up a great kitchen team to ensure that he can have nights off and he doesn't actually have to be chained to the kitchen. For me, we've actually just hired Nikki Friedley from ex-Africola in Adelaide. So she's coming on as part-time manager. And that will allow me to step away and actually spend some nights with my kids at home. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for us, is ensuring that we have that balance, not only for ourselves but also for our team.
With the prepaid model that you're introducing, do you think that we'll see something like that across the whole industry, and will it take a big sort of drive from industry to change people's minds on that? And not just at the restaurant level, but perhaps with producers as well and distributors, as sort of everyone being paid up front.
Absolutely. I kind of feel, look, with producers and distributors, it's kind of hard. We've got it now with our food suppliers. A lot of them are saying it's cash on delivery. They've had to change their model, which adds even more pressure onto, I suppose, restaurant operators. In terms of hoping that this is going to be the new norm, where we do start charging, whether it's prepaid tickets or whether it is cancellation pre-auth, I do hope the industry collectively moves forward in putting that in place, because obviously if we're unified, it actually makes the norm easier to roll out. For me, here in Adelaide, a lot of restaurants already had it. So when we opened, we put it in place purely because we had experienced it. When we dined at other venues, we were obviously always putting in our credit card details. So for us, it felt normal. And I think the more that the industry can collectively do that, it's just going to become something that almost doesn't even get challenged or questioned, because it's just what you need to do. And like you mentioned earlier, you go to the theatre, you prepay for those tickets. You go to the footy, you prepay for those tickets. It shouldn't be any different when you're going into a venue to sit down and have a meal, knowing that these venues have, pretty strict seating times, and a lot of them are actually got pretty strict seating numbers that are available. So I definitely would hope that people would put it in place to whatever degree they like, but as long as there is some sense of penalty if there is a no-show or a late cancellation.
It's been a pretty crazy little period for you guys, and, there would have been fears that, your whole livelihood could disappear right in front of you. But what are the positives to come out of this for you and Nathan?
It's definitely been emotionally challenging, I think. We, as I said, putting everything into it, and only a matter of 7-8 months later feeling like it could completely collapse was definitely harrowing. But I think given that period of time to just stop and reflect and go, okay, you know what, we've done really fucking good. We worked our asses off up until this point, and this is the successes that we've reaped, but what can we do now that will ensure that we can operate smarter? And I think that's the biggest thing for us, is ensuring that when we reopen our doors, we haven't gone into doing that with, say, a lot of deferred debt, because our business model wouldn't work with having excess amount of deferred debt. So we've made sure that financially we've paid off what we could. If that meant taking out super, take out super. If that meant selling some shares, sell some shares, whatever we needed to do, we've done. And I feel like going back into it, there's almost like a weight that's lifted off our shoulders, because we've utilised the time to do the right things for our business, rather than just complain, or rather than just kind of pod along. We've been proactive in the recovery, and I think that's definitely great. And again, for us personally, it's being able to have so much time together with our kids. So normally, as I mentioned before, Nathan's been in the industry now for 20 years, but before it used to be me at home with the kids, Nathan at work. If I wanted to see Nathan, we would have to take the stroller into the restaurant and say hi for half an hour while he's cooking a wagyu on the grill or something. So it's been really nice. My kids are like, oh, who's this? I'm like, that's your dad. So it's been really good for them to be able to have so much time with him. Now as we reopen, I think that's going to be something we have to be cautious of as well, is to not almost flip the script and go back to them not seeing him because he's never home at night. So that's where that whole balance piece comes into it. So look, there are some definite upsides to what's happened, and there's definite some real, fucking low sides to what's happened.
What do you love about what you do as a restaurateur? It's something that's fairly new to you in some ways, but what do you love about it?
I just love fucking talking to people. So it's really it sounds, it's funny. I just love having people come in and actually look, even with the fact that we are a wine bar. I know nothing about wine, so it's a bit bizarre. Literally know nothing, but I know what I like to drink. So I kind of like the fact that when people come in and I can sense that someone also has no idea what they're fucking looking at on the list, I can help them by bringing in that little bit of, you know what, you don't need to know what varietal that is or what producer that is. Let me just tell you, this is really fucking good juice. It's tasty and just, it's the one to go for. And bringing in that kind of like this, I don't know, it's almost like this sense of ease, I feel like, with this venue. And that's the stuff that I love. I love just, going around, chatting to people, working my magic, as Nathan says, doing my mojo on the floor and ensuring that the guests have a great time. And that's the thing that I love most about hospitality. And I actually can't believe it's taken me this long to get into the industry. So, yeah, it's baffled me.
What surprised you about yourself and how you've reacted during this pandemic?
Probably how quick I can get shit done when I really want something executed. And the Juice Traders in 6 days is a classic example. But I kind of feel like for myself, and I'm sure there's many others out there as well, but when you're pushed up against a wall, often that's when you can produce your best work. And I feel like, I'm known for being quite resilient, but I also like to go against the grain and almost like the fact that I'm not from hospitality and I pretty much don't fit in. I like the fact that it's a challenge for me to try and make this place as successful as possible, because I haven't got, decades of experience behind me. But what I do have is a real passion, respect and love for the hospitality sector and also the guests that walk through the door. And I just love to be able to have impact on that. And even looking at things like the grow assembly that Mira and Banjo are putting together, like shit like that. When I hear about these little, I think that's going to be even more prevalent now post-COVID, where you have these little, I suppose, seminars or these little gatherings where it's about educating people in hospitality that this is actually a career. It's not just a job. And you can do this long term, and you can do it by having great knowledge and experience and skill sets behind you, by surrounding yourself with an industry who are only more too happy to help. Myself, like being mentored and guided by Mira and even Nikki, have been some of the greatest assets to myself in the last 6-7 months. So I think that's the stuff that I absolutely love.
As restrictions ease and they let everyone back in restaurants, and we're almost back to normal, how's it going to feel for you working the floor with a full restaurant again?
It'll be, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. I'm not going to lie. I've got a feeling that when all restrictions are completely lifted, I'll probably end up locking the door and doing a locking and dancing on the bar. I've done that once before in this venue. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're celebrating pretty wildly. But until then, we're obviously going to stick to the guidelines and look forward to that day. We've got a rule when our guest centre coming this Friday onwards, we don't talk about COVID shit. Like, we want this to be a place where they can talk about other stuff, tell us about, anything else but COVID. I feel like that's all people are talking about at the moment. And it has its place, but I feel like for the first time they're able to come out and enjoy a meal, that's the stuff we want to scrub from the table. And we just want them to think about anything else but for that moment that they're with us.
Well, Sally, hats off to you and Nathan for sticking to your guns and doing this 100 your way and 50 your way, and trying to set an agenda for the industry. And let's hope that the industry gets behind that kind of thing moving forward. We really love chatting with you today. Good luck with everything and keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, definitely. Thanks a lot.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.